Hi everybody, welcome or welcome back to MelDidItHerself. Today we are doing a furniture flip on these nightstands. I have two matching nightstands that I had received from a friend very kindly. So we're going to give it a bit of an upgrade. You can see that the top is roughed up quite a bit, it has some wear and tear, but we are hoping that there's some good wood under there. So we're going to try and bring that back to life, and you can see that it's has a bit of a kind of rustic vibe with the man-made wormholes kind of put in the corner of the drawers there. But there's some nice edges to it, so I'm hoping that we can kind of, at least for the front end base, get it a little bit distressed and farmhousey looking. So here's a couple more photos as well from when it was living in its old home. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is clean. So I'm using TSP. You can use this or another heavy duty degreaser along with shop rags. And basically you just spray this on and then wipe it off using the shop rag, lint free, which is nice. And then it gets rid of any of the grime, dirt, or dust that may be on the piece so that we're not sanding it into the wood grain. Or if we're painting over it, that it's not sitting underneath that paint, because that will ruin the finish of the paint and it will start to peek through. So let's get going on that. Okay, I lied. The very first thing we're going to do is get rid of these hardware, the pulls. So using a handy dandy screwdriver, just going to get rid of that. And I just wanted to show you too, these drawers are a little bit unique in that you kind of have to give them a little extra pull to get them out, like of the slides that they're in. So if you look underneath is how you can determine kind of what sort of slide there is. So for this one, there's a little piece there. You can't see it while it's in, but it's holding that in there. So you just have to give it that little extra oomph because it sits on this little slider here to hold it in. There's a couple different kind of setups that you could have for your drawers. Sometimes there's just a plastic kind of piece that it slides along. Sometimes it's wood. So just take a look. Sometimes you need to get down and take a peek at it to see what you're working with. But if ever you're feeling that resistance, try giving it that little extra pull and it might do the trick. And now we clean. Now, normally I show the rags after the fact so you can get an idea of just how dirty it was. I forgot to do it this time, but safe to say there was enough dirt on it. And now I'm just going through with just a spray bottle with water and a clean cloth and wiping off that piece fully so that there's no residue. Okay, so I'm gonna start sanding down the top of this. I have my orbital sander, and this is 80 grit sandpaper, just to rough it up and get the initial kind of top of it off, and then I'll go in with a higher grit sandpaper to smooth it out after the fact. Always remember to wear your safety goggles and also a mask, or if you have a respirator that can take the dust particles out of the air, that's even better, but I haven't upgraded to that yet, which is on my list, I promise. If you do not have an orbital sander or just a regular sander that just uses the vibrations, you can do this by hand just with sandpaper. It's obviously going to take a little bit more blood, sweat, and tears, but it's very possible. Also, if you have sanding blocks, they're like foam on the inside, I find them to be really useful to just wrap around so that you get a flat surface so you're not really gouging into the wood. Okay, so after using the 80 grit sandpaper, this is what we are at. It's definitely textured to the touch, but it got, you know, all that top layer off. So now I'm gonna go through with whatever I have that's kind of 150 grit or higher, and that's gonna smooth this out, and then I'll probably go and just hand sand it with about 600 grit at the end. This is pine by the looks of it, so it's very soft wood, so I really want to make sure that I get that nice and smooth so that the stain really adheres well to it and is not like blotchy. Okay, so I've now gotten the top all fully sanded, as well as just the first little lip along the side, which is what I decided I wanted to go down to. I didn't want to do this whole like longer part, like the lower, I don't know what you want to call that, the lip. So now, just because there's some sawdust and stuff all over the place, I'm just going to give it a wipe down with just a damp cloth. Make sure that I get any of the dust particles that are remaining off. You can use a tack cloth for this as well. If you're using a damp cloth, just go over once with it and then let it dry and then go over it again. I find that it tends to get all of it off. Okay, so for the top of the side table, I'm going to be staining it in English chestnut, but because it's such a like soft wood, and I just know that the stain really soaks in and not necessarily always super uniformly on that type of wood. I'm going to be using a wood conditioner. Technically, you should probably use this all the time before pre-stain or before you stain wood. I don't, but I'm going to this time. So this is just Minwax. Basically, it just kind of like moisturizes the wood prior so that there's an even, you're starting it on an even playing field when you then put the stain on, but I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so step one is to give it a good stir, which I have done. I'm just using a shop rag. You can use, you know, like a brush or whatever, but this is disposable and cheap, so that's what I use. And then you just take it on there and always wipe in the direction of the wood grain, so you can see that the wood grain runs this way and not this way. So that's the way I am putting it on, just so that it gets into all of the nooks and crannies and moisturizes it well. And then you're gonna leave that on, I believe the label says 5 to 15 minutes. And then if there's any residue that hasn't soaked in, you can just wipe that back with like a dry cloth, and then we'll go in with the stain. So just some tips if you haven't stained before. You're just gonna get either, you can use an old t-shirt, you can buy staining cloths or pads. I usually just use these shop rags or shop towels, just because they're cheap and easy, and then I can just throw it out after. So you're gonna wanna, as well as the conditioner with the stain, go in the direction of the wood grain. So you can see left to right is the way that wood grain is situated. So just going along and making sure you get one as even of a coat as you can. Some stains do dry darker, so even if it's looking a little lighter than you would like and you feel the need to go over with another, like adding more stain on, I would say let it dry fully and then reevaluate, because sometimes too the wood grain looks a little bit different. You can't always tell right away, so let it dry and then reevaluate. And if you need another coat, you can go in at that point and do it. I've done it before where I've added a second coat while it's still wet, and then it got darker than I kind of wanted it, so. Okay, so I'm gonna let that stain sit for a while and see how it looks, if I end up wanting to do it darker or not. I think it's looking pretty good and decently like non-patchy. Obviously you can see the wood grain through, but I don't mind that one bit. And then once that dries, I'm going to just scuff sand the body of the piece. You can see it's kind of a bit of a shiny finish, so I'm just gonna scuff sand that with like 150 grit sandpaper over the body of it, and then wipe that clean, and then we're gonna get to painting. So now it's time for paint. I'm gonna be using this guy because I have it sitting in my stash. It is Rustoleum Chalked Ultra Matte Paint in Aged Gray. It's like a chalk paint, chalk-based paint, whatever they want to call it. And it's a little bit on the thicker side, not the thickest chalk paint I've ever used, but not the thinnest. So I like to put a bit into a little container and then mix in a little bit of water just until it gets into a bit of a thinner consistency that's better for applying. And I usually keep a little spray bottle of water on hand too to spray the brush and or the spot that I'm about to paint it on, just because it thins it out a bit. And I'm going to be using my new brush that I just got, which is the Annie Sloan oval brush. I believe it's the small version. And because I said earlier that this was like made to look a little bit more rustic, so you can see that there's some kind of man-made wormholes here. There's some kind of distressed areas. I could fill those in with wood filler now, but I find that if you put one thin coat of paint first, you can really see it a lot better. So I like to do that and just put a base coat on. I have already scuff sanded these drawers as well, and see how you can just really see all those nicks there. So I'll do one full thin base coat, and then I'll go in and fill in with wood filler any spots that I think could use a little bit of a touch-up. So a handy little tool I've come across to keep your piece off of the ground so that you can get right up nicely to the bottom when you're painting it are these painting pyramids. I got them on Amazon. I think it came with about 12 or 14 of them, and it was about $15. But obviously they're very reusable and they can hold a lot of weight. So I've had really heavy pieces where I've only used maybe like 4 or 6 of these underneath, and then they just kind of sit under the base, and it keeps it nice and sturdy and just holds it up off of the ground so you don't get this kind of stuff happening. So as you can see, you can now see a lot more clearly where those imperfections are. So I'm just taking some Elmer's wood filler, just using my finger, and I'm going to fill in those little spots that I think could use it. And then I'll let that dry, and I'll just sand it back lightly with like a high grit sandpaper or something, 150 or more, and then we'll do the second coat. Okay, after letting it sit, I decided that it is as dark as I want it to be against the contrast of the gray, so I'm going to put on the top coat. I'm using the General Finishes High Performance Flat Water-Based Top Coat. That's what I've been using recently, and it's been working well. So I'm just going to give it a nice good stir, and then I'm going to be applying it with my Zebra paintbrush, the fan brush. I just really like for top coat how it goes nice and wide, but not too thick on. Okay, so it's painted up. I probably did about 2.5 coats on this, sanding lightly in between with a high grit sandpaper just to kind of smooth out the surfaces. There's a little bit of imperfections that I definitely could have filled with wood filler, but you don't really notice them from afar, so I'm just gonna call that a day. So then in between each coat of poly on top, I'm just going to lightly sand it with a high grit sandpaper. This is 240. I definitely could go higher, like I'd like to do maybe like 400 or so, but I'm finally running out of the like huge pack of these that I had got, which was like a mixed value pack, so that's fine. Some people like to lightly wet this to kind of like wet sand it a bit. I haven't tried it, but I'm sure it would be great, but I'm not going to today. So just lightly, you'll notice it kicks up a little bit of white dust. That's fine, you can just wipe it back with a cloth, and then we'll go in with the second, and I'll probably do 4 rounds of poly on this. Okay, so now that we have this painted and stained, I just want to give it more of like a farmhouse feel and just distress some of these edges just to make it look a little bit worn, a little bit rustic. And there's no real rhyme or reason to this. You can use water, if it's a water-based chalk paint, you could use sandpaper, you can be more deliberate with it or not. I just kind of give it, you know, some stuff here and there and just kind of work my way around and see what I feel like and what looks well or what looks good. And there's no real rhyme or reason to my madness, but I'm just gonna go through and show you what it looks like after. A little tip I will say is that if you have any spots where it's kind of like looking less than perfect, you know, it's not super flat, I like to use this step as an opportunity to just kind of rough it up a little bit more, because why the hell not? Okay, so just a reminder of where we started out with these pieces. And here's where they're at. I'm super pleased with how these turned out. I did this in less than a full weekend, this flip, and I chose to sell these instead of keeping them for myself. They sold very quickly. I found that having like a set of nightstands seems to go really quickly, just like regardless of what sort of style they are. They seem to be really hot right now. So if there's any other furniture refinishers watching this, keep an eye out for nightstands, at least in my area, which is Ottawa. They go quick. So thank you so much for watching, you guys. I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. If you aren't already, I'd love if you would subscribe and follow me on Instagram and or TikTok at MelDidItHerself, where I do lots of furniture flips, and I tend to post on there a lot more often about the things that I'm working on, or any tips and tricks that I have. I'm on here a little less often. Have a great day. Bye.